When the Cahitan raiders swept into Painted Creek, Elara Rowan's world fell to ashes. Taken from her home and claimed by a warrior she barely knew, she entered a land of fire, storms, and unforgiving laws. Yet in the heart of fear and war, another battle began, one she never saw coming. The smell of burning cedar reached Elara Rowan long before she saw the flames dancing over Painted Creek. She had been gathering dry roots with her little brother near the tree-line, her arms full, when the thunder of hooves cracked the quiet evening apart. Her brother sprinted for their cabin, but the weight in her hands slowed her. A second later, riders broke over the ridge like a storm made of men and horses. Not Comanches this time. This war band painted their faces in storm blue stripes and called themselves the Cahitan. Their cries tore through the settlement as arrows fell like angry rain. Elara heard her brother scream once before the noise swallowed him. Her father fired his rifle at the raiders, shouting her name, until a spear strike silenced both voice and gun. Hands seized her, dragging her across the saddle. The world tilted, blurred. She fought until a blow behind her ear turned her limbs to water. When she came to, ropes bit into her wrists, and the land rolled endlessly beneath the horse carrying her deeper into the wilderness. The Cahitan spoke in harsh clipped tones, laughing like men who feared nothing, not gods, not justice, not grief. By nightfall, their hidden camp emerged from the shadows of the pines. Torches flickered against tall hide shelters, and the smell of roasted meat drifted through the cold air. Children ran alongside the returning warriors, pointing at her pale hair, her torn dress, her trembling hands. Women looked at her with suspicion sharpened by old wounds. The men pulled her before a council of elders. Their leader, face carved with the map of many winters, studied her long enough that she felt stripped bare. Words flew between the elders and the warriors, arguments, protests, decisions. Then one gesture cut the noise. They summoned a young warrior from the firelight. His name, whispered by the others, was Kalen. Bare-chested, marked with charcoal symbols across his skin, he looked no older than 20 summers. But their W. The first mornings in the Cahitan camp felt like waking inside a nightmare that refused to loosen its grip. Elara rose with the others at dawn, stiff from sleeping on unfamiliar furs, her hands raw from the endless work the women pushed onto her. Grinding roots until her arms ached, carrying water until her shoulders throbbed, stitching hides until her fingers bled. Each task served as a reminder that she did not belong. Not here. Not anywhere. Whispers followed her wherever she went. The pale girl. The outsider. The one Kalen claimed. Some women watched her with stone faces, others with open hostility. They talked about her as though she could not hear, mocking her clumsy movements, her accent, her fear. Elara learned quickly that showing weakness only fed their spite. So she kept her chin up even when every muscle trembled. Kalen was never far. She felt him before she saw him, a presence like a wolf at the edge of her thoughts. Sometimes he appeared behind her while she worked, silent but observant. Sometimes he corrected her actions with a gesture or a sharp word spoken in his low, controlled voice. At first she hated him for it. But as days stretched into weeks, she noticed something else beneath the authority he carried. Restraint. Kalen held himself with the tension of a bow drawn but never loosed. He did not touch her unless necessary. He did not raise his voice, though frustration flickered in his eyes when she faltered. And he never crossed the invisible line he seemed determined to keep between them. This confused her more than cruelty would have. One morning, Elara spilled a basket of freshly ground meal. Laughter erupted from the group of young women nearby. Her face flamed with humiliation as she knelt to gather the mess. Before she could, Kalen stepped forward, and the laughter died instantly. He spoke to the women in a tone as sharp as cut stone. They looked away, chastened. Elara froze, expecting him to scold her next. Instead, he crouched. Spring arrived on Painted Creek with restless winds and swollen rivers, and with it came changes Elara could neither predict nor avoid. The Cahitan prepared to move camp following the migrating herds, and every member of the tribe was drawn into the great tide of work, packing hides, dismantling lodges, gathering tools, preparing horses. Even she, the outsider, became a part of that rhythm simply by necessity. Her hands toughened, her back strengthened. The tasks that once left her trembling she now completed with quiet endurance. But the whispers never fully died. Some women still watched her with narrowed eyes, seeing in her pale skin and foreign accent a threat to their traditions. Children no longer tugged her hair, yet some still hid behind baskets and pointed at her, half fearful, half fascinated. Only Kalen remained unchanged, constant, like a shadow cast by a fire. Always near, always watching. He spoke to her more often now, mixing words of his language with broken English, teaching her slowly, patiently. She hated how easily she remembered his voice. One afternoon, as she struggled to lift a heavy water skin onto a pack horse, Kalen stepped behind her and took the weight from her hands. She startled, nearly stumbling into him. He steadied her with one arm around her waist, and for a brief, breathless moment, she felt the solid warmth of his body pressed to hers. Heat surged up her throat, and she pulled away too quickly, muttering a shaky thanks in his language. Kalen's gaze lingered, dark and searching, as if he wanted to say something more. Instead, he nodded and returned to securing the straps. That night, rain swept across the plains in a hard, cold sheet. The tribe sheltered in their half-packed lodges, tending fires that hissed beneath dripping hides. Elara sat alone in the quiet teepee she shared with Kalen, listening to the storm and fighting a battle within herself. She could no longer deny the shift between them. His presence no longer mad. The storm did not rest that night, nor did the Cahitan. Lightning carved jagged scars across the sky as warriors scrambled to secure horses, reinforce shelters, and gather weapons. Elara stood under the dripping hide of the teepee, watching the village transform from a peaceful camp into a fortress wrapped in shadows and firelight. Kalen returned to her side, rain pouring down his braids. His chest rose and fell with sharp, controlled breaths. "You stay close," he said. "Do not leave the lodge unless I call." She bristled. "I'm not helpless." His gaze softened but held firm. "Not helpless. But danger is coming fast." Outside, the three scouts spoke in hurried tones, pointing toward the southern ridge. Though Elara understood only fragments, fear sharpened everything. Blue coats, guns, burned camp to the east, searching for survivors. Her stomach turned. Soldiers were supposed to protect her people, her former people. But these soldiers had not come for justice. They had come for revenge. Settlers saw all tribes as one enemy, one threat, one target to cleanse. If they found the Cahitan camp, they would not spare anyone. Not warriors. Not women. Not her. Kalen touched her wrist gently, a silent reassurance that trembled through her. "I go with others. You hide if fight comes. You expect me to sit and wait while you face them alone?" He hesitated, then said quietly, I expect you to live." Before she could answer, the chief called the warriors together. Kaelin squeezed her hand once, brief but startling in its tenderness, before he disappeared into the storm with the others. Alara watched him go, chest tight with something she didn't want to name. Hours crawled by. Rain softened to a cold drizzle. The camp grew eerily quiet, as though the earth itself held its breath. Children were ushered into hidden shelters. Women gathered knives, water, and blankets. Elders whispered prayers to the spirits of wind and fire. Alara paced inside the teepee, unable. The battle at the ridge roared like a living beast, snapping trees and hurling smoke into the morning sky. Alara pressed herself against the fallen log, breath sharp as she tried to make her trembling hands obey her. Kaelin fired an arrow past her shoulder, the string snapping against his fingers, sending a soldier tumbling backward down the slope. "Keep down!" he barked, though fear cracked beneath the command. "I can fight," she insisted, grabbing a discarded spear. He shot her a look, half disbelief, half fierce pride, but there was no time to argue. A soldier charged up the hillside, boots slipping on wet grass. Alara raised the spear with shaking arms. The man swung his rifle toward her. Kaelin slammed into him from the side, knocking both of them into the mud. They rolled, wrestling for the weapon. The soldier managed to land a blow to Kaelin's wounded shoulder. Kaelin hissed in pain, losing ground. Without thinking, Alara lunged and drove the butt of the spear into the soldier's ribs. He gasped, collapsing just long enough for Kaelin to wrench the rifle away and silence him. Kaelin stared at her for a heartbeat, rain, smoke, and something burning in his eyes. Then more gunfire snapped him back to reality. "Stay close," he ordered, not harshly this time, but with a strange, desperate urgency. The Cahitan warriors fought with the fury of a tribe defending every living memory they had. Soldiers advanced in disciplined lines, rifles cracking in steady bursts. Several teepees at the edge of the camp caught fire, smoke curling upward like dark fingers. Alara's lungs seized. Not again. Not another home burning. Not another life torn apart. A scream rang out behind them. A young Cahitan warrior fell, clutching his leg as a soldier approached to finish him. Kaelin sprinted forward, but Alara moved first, hurling the spear with every ounce of strength she had. It struck the soldier's arm, sending his shout wide. Kaelin reached the fallen warrior and pulled him to. The ridge was quiet the next morning, but it was not the peace of safety, only the stillness that settles after a storm has decided to return. Smoke from burned brush hung low over the valley, the air thick with the ghosts of gunfire. The Cahitan moved through the aftermath with grim purpose, tending to the wounded, gathering arrows, covering the fallen in wolf hides for burial at dusk. Alara had witnessed death before, but never like this. Never men she knew by name, never warriors who had shared their food with her, dying to protect their people. Kaelin walked among them with a wrapped shoulder and a jaw set like carved stone. He spoke little, offering a touch here, a nod there. The other warriors returned his gestures with respect, yet when their eyes drifted to Alara helping bind wounds or carry water, something deeper flickered: recognition, acceptance, or perhaps only curiosity for a fate intertwined with their future leader. Alara knelt beside an older woman whose leg had been grazed by a bullet. As she tied a strip of cloth tightly, the woman murmured in the Cahitan tongue, "You fight with the heart of river fire." Alara blinked, surprised. It was the closest thing to a compliment she'd ever received from one of them. Kaelin approached as she worked, kneeling across from her. "She speaks true," he said quietly. You help my people. They see. Elara avoided his eyes. I only did what anyone would do. Not anyone, Kaelin answered. Some run. You stayed. Those words sank into her like embers. She concentrated on tightening the bandage, but her hands trembled. Kaelin noticed. His fingers brushed hers, steadying them. The touch was brief, accidental, or maybe not, but it stole her breath just the same. Later, when the wounded were tended and the dead honored, the tribe gathered near the central fire. Dark clouds thickened over the plains, carrying the bitter promise of another storm. The chief, Aaron, stood tall with his wolf pelt cloak sweeping across the GR. Night fell before the Cahitan tribe finished their preparations, and by the time the moon rose, the camp was already dissolving into motion. Teepees came down like vanishing shadows. Horses were saddled, packs strapped tight, fires smothered until only faint embers glowed in the dark. The tribe moved quickly, with the grim discipline of people who had survived too many hunts, both as hunter and hunted. Elara stood at the edge of the clearing, clutching a bundle of supplies Kaelin had given her. She watched the tribe shift like a great living river, children perched on ponies, elders wrapped in furs, warriors guiding the caravan north toward the high forests. The air smelled of pine and smoke, heavy with unspoken fear. Kaelin approached, his shoulder bandaged, his steps slower than usual. You walk beside me, he said, tightening the strap on his horse. If danger comes, you get behind my saddle. She frowned. I can walk on my own. He nodded. I know. But I would still have you close. The admission made her chest warm with something she tried not to examine. She fell into stride beside him as the tribe began the long trek through the dark hills. The path wound between towering pines whose branches whispered overhead like guardians murmuring warnings. Hours passed. The deeper they went, the thicker the forest grew. The moon barely touched the ground, leaving only shifting silhouettes to mark their way. Elara found comfort in the quiet thud of Kaelin's footsteps beside hers, in the steady sound of his breath. But peace was fragile. Near midnight, a young scout galloped down the line, rain and sweat streaking his face. He spoke in urgent bursts to the chief, who lifted his staff and halted the column. Every head turned as tension rippled through the tribe. Kaelin stepped toward the scout, exchanging quick, sharp words. When he returned to Elara, his face was a mask she had learned to fear. What is it? She whispered. Soldiers, he answered. They follow you. Gunfire tore the quiet forest apart. Sparks burst from bark, arrows hissed through the air. Horses screamed as shadows clashed beneath the towering pines. Elara pressed herself behind the fallen pine trunk, heart hammering so violently she could hardly breathe. Torches swung wildly in the clearing, painting the chaos in flashes of fire and blood. Kaelin moved ahead of her like a wild spirit of the woods, silent, swift, deadly. His arrows flew with unerring accuracy, each shot cutting through the gunfire. The smoke drifting from the soldiers' rifles mixed with the cold mist rising from the forest floor. The night smelled of pine sap and iron. Stay down! Kaelin shouted, loosing another arrow. But Elara couldn't hide. Not anymore. A warrior stumbled near her, wounded, clutching a bleeding arm. Elara crawled toward him, ripping cloth from her sleeve to tie around the wound. As she worked, she felt the ground tremble with approaching riders. She saw them then, soldiers on horseback, emerging from the fog like phantoms, rifles raised. Elara! Move! Kaelin's voice cut through the roar. She dove just as a shot slammed into the tree behind her, splintering wood inches from her head. She rolled across the dirt, lungs burning, and scrambled behind a boulder. Kalen appeared beside her, breath harsh, his body shielding hers. "You listen to me now," he said, voice raw with fear. "If they break the line, you run to the river. Do not hesitate." She met his eyes, fury and fear tangled in her chest. "I'm not running while you stay to die." His jaw tightened. "If I die, I die a warrior. But if you die, your blood breaks me." She froze. Something in his voice, unpolished, unguarded, hit deeper than any blow. But before she could speak, another wave of soldiers burst through the tree line. The Cahitans scattered, regrouping in disciplined formation. Warriors took positions among the branches, raining arrows from above. The chief, Aaron, stood firm in the center of the clearing. The gunfire faded slowly, like thunder rolling into the distance, but no one in the Cahitan camp dared breathe relief. The forest held its silence too tightly, as if waiting for something worse to arrive. Smoke hovered low among the trees, drifting like ghosts between the pines. Alara stood beside Kalen beneath a canopy of trembling needles, her hands still shaking from the shot she fired. The weight of the rifle lingered in her arms long after she dropped it. Kalen wiped blood from his shoulder, the wound reopened from the fight. Though his breath was strained, he moved with the same controlled intensity he always carried. Warriors gathered around him, exchanging quick, urgent words. Alara didn't understand all of them, but she felt their fear as if it lived under her skin. "They will return," one of the scouts warned. "Soldiers regroup on the south ridge. More men. More guns." Kalen's jaw tightened. "They come because they think we are broken. They forget who we are." Alara stepped closer. "What can we do? There are too many." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment the chaos around them fell away. "We do as the wolf does," he said softly. "We vanish into the deeper forest. And when the enemy follows, he finds only teeth." Before she could answer, the chief Aaron approached, leaning heavily on his staff. His face, marked by years of battles, seemed older than the morning before. "We move north," he said. "At once. The high cliffs will shelter the women and the young. Warriors will cover the rear." Kalen nodded, but his eyes flickered to Alara. She felt that gaze like a hand on her heart, heavy, grounding. "Stay beside me," he murmured. "No matter what comes." The tribe began their retreat, slipping through the narrow deer paths, torches extinguished to hide their movement. Alara walked near Kalen's horse, her legs trembling with exhaustion. The forest grew darker as they traveled, the pines leaning closer until the sky became only a thin sylph. Kalen and the 5 chosen warriors slipped into the forest like phantoms, their steps silent despite the wet leaves and broken branches underfoot. Alara watched them vanish deeper into the dark pines until even the faint movement of their braids disappeared. The forest swallowed them whole, leaving behind a silence she couldn't bear. The rest of the tribe pressed north. The path tightened into a narrow corridor between tall cliffs, guiding them toward the shelter of the high plateau. Warriors formed a protective ring around the elders and children. Alara walked among them, cloak tight around her shoulders, eyes constantly searching the shadows behind them. Every crack of a twig set her heart racing. Every distant echo of a bird made her think it was rifle fire. Near midday, the group stopped to rest in a mossy clearing. The children huddled under fallen logs, women gathered roots and filled water skins, and the chief stood at the clearing's edge in silent prayer. Elara sat with her back against a boulder, hands trembling despite the warmth of the sun breaking through the pines. One of the women, Raina, approached her and knelt down. She was older, with streaks of silver in her braids and a face lined by countless winters. "Your spirit is loud," Raina said gently. "Fear speaks through it." Elara looked up. "Kaelin, do you think he'll return?" Raina studied her for a long moment, eyes softening. "The wolf does not fall easily. He knows these woods better than any. Trust in his feet, and in the spirits who follow him." Elara wanted to believe her, but each hour that passed gnawed at her resolve. She forced herself to help gather firewood, to comfort the children, to follow the tribe as they climbed higher towards safety. Yet her thoughts remained fixed on the forest behind them. As evening brushed the sky with copper and violet, the tribe reached a narrow overlook. From there, the land stretched far back into the valley, a maze of dark trees and winding streams. The warning in Kaelin's voice spread through the Cahitan like winter wind. Warriors stiffened. Mothers pulled children closer. Even the horses sensed the shift, hooves pawing nervously at the earth. Elara felt her heart contract as Kaelin spoke again, quieter but no less dire. "They followed our trail through the ravine," he said. "We misled them for a time, but they're trackers. They are not common soldiers." Aaron's brows drew together. "Scouts?" Kaelin nodded. "Elite ones. Men who hunt for captives, not battles." Elara's breath caught. A sudden coldness settled beneath her ribs. She remembered the burned cabins at Painted Creek, the soldiers' eyes full of something worse than hatred, purpose. They had not come to destroy the Cahitan alone. They had come to claim her as proof of their fury. The chief struck the ground with his staff. "We move now. Higher, faster. No rest until we reach the stone pass." Tension erupted into motion. The tribe surged upward along a narrow, rocky path, shadows weaving between torchless figures. Elara walked close to Kaelin, his injured shoulder brushing her arm. Even wounded, he kept scanning every direction, every rustle in the trees. "You should stay behind the others," he murmured. "And leave you here limping alone?" she shot back. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, so fleeting she almost doubted it. "I do not limp." She raised a brow at him. "You absolutely limp." He glared half-heartedly, but the softness in his eyes betrayed him. Even in fear, he looked at her as though she anchored him more than the earth itself. The trail steepened. Rocks crumbled beneath their steps. Warriors flanked the tribe's edges, forming a living shield. The higher they climbed, the stronger the wind grew, carrying distant sounds up the mountain like messengers. Elara heard it then. A faint metallic clatter. Then another. Then the sharp, unmistakable snap of a rifle bolt. Kaelin froze. "They are closer than I hoped," he whispered. Aaron his. The battle at the stone pass ended not with victory, but with silence. Smoke drifted between the cliffs like morning veils as the last echoes of rifle fire faded into the cold morning air. The soldiers retreated at last, broken by the Cahitans' fierce defense and the unforgiving terrain. But the cost lay heavy on the ground. Arrows snapped, shields splintered, warriors wounded but standing. Elara sat on a mossy ledge above the pass, breath unsteady, hands still trembling from the bow she had learned to draw in desperation. She watched the tribe below tend to their injured, faces streaked with soot and exhaustion. They had survived. Against every expectation, they had survived. Footsteps approached. She didn't have to turn to know it was Kalen. He lowered himself beside her with a faint, pained wince, his shoulder freshly bandaged. For a moment neither spoke. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant rain, cool and sharp. "You fought," he said quietly. There was no command in his voice now, only pride. And something deeper. Elara swallowed. "I couldn't let them take everything from me again." "You did more," he said. "You saved us. You saved me." She looked at him then, truly looked. The warrior who once felt like a cage now felt like a refuge she had never expected to find. His eyes, dark and tired, still held the same fierce fire that frightened her the first night. But now she understood the warmth beneath it. "I thought I didn't belong anywhere anymore," she whispered. Kalen reached out, his fingers brushing hers. "You belong where your courage leads you. And it led you here." Their hands intertwined, slowly, naturally, as if this moment had been walking toward them since the night the Cahitan rode into Painted Creek. Below, the tribe began to move again, preparing their long journey deeper into the highlands. Life would continue. New storms would come. But for now, in this quiet carved from chaos, Elara felt something she had not felt in a long